Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets will have some interesting games to play and watch this weekend. But on the trade front, the Oklahoma City Thunder putting restrictions around who they could acquire in a trade for Cam Johnson. And is that pick vault opening up a little bit wider? We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms, and let you know that we are talking big time, big opportunity, trade discussions here for the Brooklyn Nets, but also taking a look at some of these games that matter as maybe we need to reset, Doug, a little bit about the tank conversation and whether or not the Nets are surging up that board and into that top 5, top 4-ish kind of conversation.
Yeah, 6th in tank odds right now. Obviously, the goal is to probably be top 3 right by the end of the season. Goal. It doesn't roll off the tongue very well to talk like that about sort of like how to think about sports. But the goal is probably top 3 because it's seen as probably. I mean, it's really even seen as like a 2-player draft at this point between Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper, and even Cooper Flagg is like sort of separating. But overall, as the Nets build to the future, it's not just going to be around this first pick, right? Or whatever pick they get in this draft. Like, rebuilds take many bites at the apple. And the goal is to have as many chances at getting those players as possible, not just putting all your eggs in the Cooper Flagg basket, to put that perfectly. So the wordsmith. And so so when we talk about trades and like Cam Johnson and packages like that, the idea should be you want to have as many picks as possible. You want to have as many young players as possible, because the hope is that a few of them turn out to be star or star adjacent. Yeah. And Cam Johnson represents a really great opportunity to be able to do that, because there's going to be some good teams with probably real stuff coming around calling.
Yeah, and it becomes interesting, and I wonder too, it's like, we've gone back and forth about how concerned the Nets fans should be, or how concerned the Nets should be about trying to get as high as possible into those tank odds. At this point right now, I will just say, sitting there 6th in odds, we talk about percentages really is all that, to me, is what matters more than, now you're top 3, you're top 2, and no one's going to catch Washington, you wouldn't think at this point. But when you look over at it now, being in 6th position means it's like you are just on the cusp. You get to top 5, you jump from 34.8% for a top 4 chance to 42.1, right? You jump from an 8.3% chance of the number 1 overall pick to 10.5%. There's that 5th spot, which Utah sits in right now at 9-27, Charlotte 8-27. I think if you get into that, at least for me, being top 5 in lottery odds checks a mental box around, hey, man, go ahead and toss the ping pong balls up and we'll see where they fall. Anything outside of that, you do feel like you're walking in the door being at a significant disadvantage, because those next handful of teams, the highest you get to is 52%. When you're in 42 to 52, that feels so much different than saying under 35% chance to land in the top 4, under 10% chance to get that number 1 overall pick. And I think that that's probably the most realistic goal the Nets can have here. Get to 5, maybe 4, and then go from there once you see how these other teams line up.
And it might not be super easy. I mean, like the Hornets and Raptors and teams like this have significantly more talent at this point, right? Like if you look at the Hornets with Melo and Brandon Miller, and then, we look at the Raptors with Scotty Barnes and IQ and RJ Barrett, like these, it should be, except the Nets dug themselves sort of like a weird tanking hole by just being already 5 games up on these teams. That's all. I mean, 5 games up is not nothing, right? And so you would think they should be able to, in a race to the bottom, be able to get there. Like the Pelicans bring Zion back, right? The Jazz are the Jazz. It's always kind of hard to tell. So these are the teams that they're sort of competing with here. On paper, it really doesn't seem like it should be close from here on out. The problem is that the Nets already just had a bunch of wins early that were kind of unexpected. So it is what it is at this point. I think the season's long enough, and we've seen the writing on the wall talent-wise for how the Nets probably stand to play here, over the next few months. No D'Lo tonight, whatever. But there is some work to do on this front. Like these other teams, they're ahead of them. 5 or 6 games is just not nothing.
Well, by the way, from 1 to 6, 11 and 49 in their last 10 games combined. That's what the top of this draft is doing right now. The only team that's won more than 2 games in their last 10 is the Utah Jazz, 3 and 7. And just to your point, okay, you're trying to make up a 4-game gap with the Utah Jazz over the next 20 games. Even if the Brooklyn Nets only win 4 games over 20, they go 4 and 16. You still need Utah to go ahead and win. They need to go 8 and 12 to get yourself back in that conversation, right? And it's just, when you look at the standings and you look at records, you go, well, maybe they can catch some of these teams. Something's possible. And then you say something like 8 and 12 over a 20-game stretch for one of these teams. You go, well, come on now. I know the Brooklyn Nets did that to start the year, but none of these teams have sniffed that type of percentage at any point, even over a 5-game stretch in this season so far.
The season's 45% over. We're creeping at the 50.
Right. Yeah. There's only so many games.
We're creeping toward the 50% mark with where the season is right now, right? They played 45% of their games already. And so that's when you're like, well, 4 wins, 5 wins isn't that much. It kind of is in the context of how many games are left, right? And so these are not, minor movements in the standings. So if they sat firmly within that one group of that, like really the single digit win group is the group, right? It's like, Hornets, Raptors, Wiz, Jazz, Pelicans. Like those are the single digit win group for as it is right now. Their motivations are all a little weird. Most of those other teams had, maybe not the Raptors, maybe not the Wizards, but some of these other teams had their eye on something else. Like I think the Hornets thought they were going to be considerably better than they are now.
Yeah.
Right. Like just with that talent, they've had some injuries and just general stuff. For sure. The Pelicans thought they were not going to be 7 and 31. Always a little confusing about like sort of where the Jazz see themselves, but these other teams have sort of the same operating, sort of outlook, and really in going forward too. So I don't think this is going to be an easy lift. I think you're right about thinking about the top 5. About like that should be the ultimate, like sort of where we would want them to land just in terms of best foot odds forward. But it's just going to be work. I just think I get why, if you were pro tanking, I get why you would be frustrated with some of those early wins, because this is where it starts to crystallize around the problem. And as we will asterisk and caveat from here to the end of the season, we totally get that this is anti how you're used to rooting for sports. We get it. It need not explain it really that much more. It sucks. It sucks to root for sports this way. It's not why sports were made. We wish they would redo the rules. I will say it every episode from now to the end of the season.
The Brooklyn Nets, by the way, at 13 and 24, just let's say 13 wins, are as close from a win standpoint to the 10th seed and the Phoenix Suns 17 and 19 as they are.
That's a great way to look
the
at
Utah
it.
Jazz. Right.
Yeah.
Let's tap into that a little bit deeper here as we continue to look forward about some of these teams and the standings for Tankathon odds, and also the way the Nets try to get a little bit worse by sending out Cam Johnson and this OKC conversation that continues to grow. We'll do that here in just one moment.
I'll let you know this message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. You tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you got one form or 20 TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress, so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, we're going to talk about, coming up here in a second, OKC. I spoke with Ryan Stiles from Locked On Thunder, tried to get a little more framework around what OKC is willing to do. They got 33 picks of their own. We'd like a lot of them in a trade for Cam Johnson. But that last note that I made there at the end of the first segment, I mentioned Phoenix at 17 and 20, or 17 wins, excuse me. But you've also got Chicago. They're in 9th, 17 and 20, right? Philadelphia, 15 wins. But you also have San Antonio, Sacramento with 18 wins, Atlanta, Golden State with 19 wins. That fills out the lottery right now. 19 wins. The Nets are 6 wins away, 6 wins away from being at the back end of the lottery, 4 wins away from being in a top 5 position. And that does really, I think, crystallize the muddling middle ground that they stuck themselves into here by being a competitive basketball team early in the year.
Yeah, and if you think about it too, like the other way to think about that is the Nets are closer to the play-in than they are to the bottom of the lottery. Like that's just where they are right now. They're closer. Now that's not going to finish that way because we've watched what the last couple games look like without Cam Johnson, without D'Lo, without Cam Thomas, like without these guys. Once again, I label Cam Thomas last. It's so brutal. I gotta get better at that. That's I'm gonna promise.
There's gonna be a trend here. People are gonna start to pick up.
I'm telling you right now. I know we're gonna talk about Cam Johnson. I'm telling you right now. The reason he doesn't come up first is he's like the one guy that doesn't come up with any of our what's gonna happen with them discussions. Like that's actually really the reason. It's like he's just, and maybe it is. Maybe it's because they haven't signed him. He should be part of that discussion more. But that's really the reason. Not because I don't think he's like anything. It's just good or whatever. It's just because we talk about all these other guys in the context of like, will they or won't they finish the season with the Nets? And he's just one of those. Right. He's just one of those guys that just doesn't fall into that. But let's talk Cam Johnson because if OKC comes calling, and we really hope they do, they offer the most compelling sort of like group of assets between picks and players that I think could be on the table. I mean, we don't even think anyone else is close, right? Like I think they would offer, they can go the highest in terms of like return. It would seem among the NBA of teams that would be realistically interested. Probably just any team, not even realistically interested.
And it's the combination of having not only some established players that are also young, also just having young players that can be put into the, good looking prospect bin, and then also the picks, right? So it just feels like, and we had these discussions with a couple of different hosts around the Locked On network that have text or send me messages saying, hey, what do you think? Whatever. And I keep coming back to, yes, that sounds like a pretty good offer. Also, there's going to be a team, most likely OKC, that once you put your offer in, they're going to go, and here's an extra pick on top, or here's this extra player that we weren't thinking about offering you. Are you going to be willing to go the extra mile? So I had asked Ryan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder, to give just a realistic rundown of it, because we talked about Nikola Topic, being a part of this trade package, and that being the one that you brought up as, hey, you put some picks and him together with the other money matching, that feels like a home run for the Brooklyn Nets. Contract-wise, Ryland said at a minimum, Wiggins, Kenrick Williams, Joe would have to be included as a baseline for the money. And then he talks about younger players, Dylan Jones, Dang, even Topic. But he specifically said that Presti is as in love with that player as he has been with any prospect he's ever had in his GMing career. And it just seems like it would take a lot just from a player standpoint. Build me your still better than every other offer if you don't get to include Nikola in it. And then we have also the pick discussion about it, which I was actually surprised about how far Ryland said OKC would go on that front as well.
Yeah, I can understand. They just drafted him. We talked in this topic. Like, they just drafted him this year. He would have gone higher in the draft had he not been injured. He probably would have gone top 5, something like that, which is something, right? He's a point guard with size. He's got really good floor vision. It's, he hasn't played against like this highest level competition, but you'd be remiss. You can understand why.
So salivating from a net standpoint. Sorry, not to cut you off. Like, it's just so salivating to think about having that mold of player in the organization.
Totally.
It does make you like almost be like, we're going to have to maybe do whatever it takes to get him.
Oh, I'm telling you right now. If they make a deal with OKC and he's not included, fans will go nuts and say Mark's failed. I'm positive. That's going to for sure happen. If they make a trade with the Thunder and he is not included in it, there will be a certain subset of fans that is going to come around and be like, Mark's blew it. I knew it. He can't do it. Like, he never gets the guys. Like, just because this is how we've been around this game long enough to know how this works. This is exactly how it works. I feel very confident. I feel very confident this will be the reaction. And we'll probably get on the next day and talk if they make this trade, right? And we'll get on and say, oh, it's a bummer to not get this included. Because the thing is, after him, I mean, they do have some prospects, right? Dylan Jones, AJ Mitchell, guys that are like, were essentially first round picks over the last couple of years. I'm not interested. The salary filler guys like Wiggins, like Isaiah Joe. I mean, they're 25 years old. Like, who cares? Kind of 25, 26. It's like, it is what it is, right? Like, they kind of fall into the Tyrese Martin category to me. It's better than Tyrese Martin, but not like so much better, right? And so,
not guaranteed to be a part of anything you're doing 2 years from now, potentially.
Well, Wiggins would be because he's under contract.
Well, yes. But by the way, I mean, big factor here. It's like, salary matching. We know the Nets aren't like huge on the idea of taking on long-term money. It's not like it's huge money per se, but it isn't insignificant. Though. And having a player like Wiggins on a 5-year contract going forward until he's 30, 31 years old, Like that is sizable. Even if it's movable, it's still something you have to figure out over the next few years.
Nets aren't going to want to take that. I can almost guarantee they're not going to want to take it. It seems like that might have been part of the reason they didn't do the Memphis deal, was because they didn't want Konchar's money for one more season, right? Like that was one more season at $6 million. And so like Wiggins at $8 million till, my kids driving it off to college. Like I'm not really sure that's going to be where they want to land. So I can't really see them taking that contract back if the Memphis piece was correct. Overall, though, when we look at, so you have Topic, like I say, you have Dylan Jones, you have AJ Mitchell. These guys haven't been massive parts of, or really any parts of the Thunder rotation. Thunder have a crowded house, like with just guys now, because they're starting five. Well, I would say their starting four is relatively set, and then they've been rotating this Kason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, like sort of 2-guard spot basically all season. Like those guys have kind of swapped around starts. Almost like for a while, it was almost game to game. They would just choose one of those 3 guys to start, right? And so, but after that, like these guys play all the minutes, and then you get a few minutes off the bench from Kenrich Williams. You get a little bit of other J. Will, right? And AJ Mitchell has played a decent amount, I suppose. But after that, you're really like, you can see why the Thunder wouldn't mind aggregating some of this together, because like they just have all their minutes kind of taken care of. So I don't know. It's a little hard to kind of frame exactly what should be coming back here, which is why when you have this top, let's just call him a top 10 pick. I know he wasn't a top 10 pick, but he basically should have been. Yeah. When you have this top 10 pick in Topic, you would have your eyes set on him, because everything else is not all that exciting, even though it wouldn't be the worst stuff in the world if you piled it with picks.
Yeah, and I think the interesting part of it is too, is the Memphis point you bring up is really good, because hey man, like some of this money, it may not seem that big. When you talk about even say Kendrick Williams, okay, it's 3 years, that's a lot. Well, it's only $6 million this year. It's not like it's massive going forward, but the Nets just seem dedicated to that. Well, it's not overly significant. If you think about next year and the Nets drafting 4 first-round draft picks potentially, I'm trying to remember the money off the top of my head, but it's something in this kind of range where these guys are going to make between $5 to $7, $10, $12 million a piece. When you couple it all together, if you end up drafting a few of them, not only will it represent maybe 20 plus million on the books, but you're also thinking about over the next 2 and 3 years, if these guys are hitting and they're guys you want to build around and keep a part of your core, you are going to be talking about having to allocate or at least bookmark funds for it down the line, right? So, and it's all relative to a 3-year deal, but 32 years old and 26 to 27, now that's a team option for Williams, but $7 million in 26, 27, I just don't want that money on my books, right? I don't want that to be a part of the conversation if it doesn't have to be. So coming up here in a second, let's reset it around Nikola and say, what does it mean if the Brooklyn Nets want him? Can OKC play a little bit of hardball when it comes to the picks? And could 3 first-round picks change the Nets' tunes about what they want in return? We'll do that here in just one moment.
Before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at tell you about our friends at Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about? You're paying for it twice. It's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even know, or didn't even realize I was paying for. Adam walked me through this in real time. Watch me go through this in real time when I just realized I had three separate streaming services, subscriptions to the same one that I didn't even watch. Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant there for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings, brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million. Some of that was mine. And canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon.
All right, so to tie a pretty little bow on the Locked On Nets episode, talking about not only the tank odds and how the Nets are right there, but they're also right there in being a part of the play-in tournament potentially. We think that there's going to be more losses along the way. OKC, they're at the table. Rylan Stiles says, hey, we're going to give you anything you want, basically, except for Nikola. He also did say, though, they would be willing, he thinks, to include 2 to 3 first-round picks. So is there a world where not getting Nikola in this deal is okay if the Nets are getting 3 first-round picks included in any of these other players, whoever the best prospects are you like, whatever the money matching is, that don't include Nikola, with 3 first-round picks out into 2030 and 2031, move the needle for you relative to maybe other packages that we've been talking about?
I mean, so they have these other picks. They have like Utah protected 1 to 10. That's not going to convey. That's not going to convey this year, right? They have the Philly 1 through 6 protected. That's not going to convey. They have Atlanta's. So that's Atlanta's second. They have their own. So these own picks so my point is they have these other picks out there, but a lot of them have protections that are not going to convey this year, and then there have this other swap that Brooklyn's actually kind of part of. So it's a little weird to know exactly like where somebody's going to land. My guess is most of them are just going to land, like most of their available picks are going to land back end of the first round because they're just going to be good. Like there's a lot of these other ones that they brought in from other teams aren't going to convey this season, and OKC is just going to be good here for the next 5 years or something like that.
And so, right? It's a factor when you think about the first round picks you're getting. You have to, like, this is a young team, young core, going to be good. You can't just, some of these other ones we talked about, older, more veteran teams, and say, oh, yeah, well, in 2-3 years, we could be talking about a top 10 pick. No, this team's probably going to one of the more reasonable expectations of this team being good for the next handful of years. This team could sustain injuries and still not be terrible. Right. Like, but they don't even have Chet. Chet's not even playing right now, and this team's awesome. Right. So now maybe he just never gets fully healthy or whatever, but they could sustain SGA getting hurt, and they wouldn't be a championship contender, but they'd probably be like a 500 team or something like that. So especially if they added Cam Johnson to the mix, right. And over the next few years. So this is just not going to be, the OKC picks are going to be in the 20s at least, and probably like 25 to 30 every single year. What's up? Can I, because you're talking about, you mentioned some of these picks and there's the protections on them, whatever, just as an example, because Doug, you often use the reference of like, you need, a degree in rocket science to understand some of the mechanics. In 2029, there's a first round pick that OKC gets via Denver. Only if, and at least 2 years after, Denver conveys a potential first round pick to OKC, Denver's second potential first round pick to OKC, protected for selections 1 through 5 in 2029 and 1 through 5 in 2030. If Denver has not conveyed this second potential first round pick to OKC by 2030, then Denver will instead convey 2030 second round pick to OKC. It's like, the weeds. Yeah, by the way, dude, that's not even their most confusing one. No, I chose an easier one just to be able to read through it. There are ones like about Phoenix and Houston that are listed in here. The Clippers are listed on there too, where you're like, what are we talking about? You get the pick traded to and you go, do we realistically have this pick, or is this just like holding air in your pocket? It's insane. The one from this year between Houston, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Clippers reads, I've joked with, it reads like War and Peace. It's so long. You can't even follow it. Like we would end the show if I even tried it. But just as a note, I'm only not going to read it because Adam just read this other one. It's considerably longer than the one that Adam just read with all the caveats, of like what gets swapped around. I've looked at this one. You can't even follow it. You can't follow the thread. It's hilarious. And yeah, so you do need a degree in just sort of like draft asset key party when you look at these things. Good. By the way, there's a reason people get paid a lot to like figure this stuff out, right? And there's also a reason why, by the way, I don't do this often. Doug's usually the one that tries to frame fans. This is also the reason why. Stop talking like you know exactly how all these mechanics work and what the Nets should do, what any team should do with these trades. There's no way, as you broad stroke read through the bullet point list on a website, that you can even begin to wrap your head around where the true value is, right? Oh, these are the picks we definitely want to get from this team because it'll mean X, Y, Z. There's so many caveats inside of this. They have dedicated departments to try to figure out what do we want to ask for when a team says they're willing to put first round picks on the table. Which are the ones that make the most quote unquote sense? Yeah, I've always thought there should be some kind of like color labeling system that just shows like the probabilistic return of a pick that kind of shifts over time as a team changes. So it's like, because everyone calls it a first round pick, but we all know that's not true because the top 5 pick is considerably more valuable than a 5 through 10 and like it's all just gradient, right? Like these are just, this is all graded out very differently, but everyone just calls it a first and everyone's like, oh, they got all these firsts. It's like, well, when you get 6 firsts from the Knicks, like the Knicks are gonna be good for 6 years, right? Or 5 years or something like that. So it's just like it's not the same. Like if you could trade for the Wizards pick this year, we should call that like a super first or something like that, right? Like it's like we should come up with a new name. It's like, oh, they got a first round pick, dude. They got a super first, and the super first is what like frankly the Suns picks could look like super firsts in a few years, right? Yes, but we just don't know. So you have to like grade it on a scale. That's all I wish there was a slightly better labeling system for what these picks could be, because when we talk about the Thunder,
we just know these are not going to ever be super firsts, right? They're not going to be. They're not going to even be top 15. They're not going to be for top 15. They're not even going to be in the lottery. This team's not going to be in the lottery for, I mean, I don't want to guarantee it, but it really doesn't. They're not candidates to be in the lottery for the next 5 years.
No, and that's why maybe you start looking at those, the Houston Phoenix ones, the Clippers ones, the Denver ones, and go, hey, we'll take our shot on those little bit older teams. Are going to be retooling soon, whatever the case may be. By the way, it's tangentially related. We have to have a conversation next week at some point about Phoenix and this Jimmy Butler connection and what's potentially going to happen there. Because good Lord, I mean, that team, they want it, but also once that team does or does not get it, they are going to fall off an absolute cliff when it comes to what their future looks like here, because they're getting even older and pushing more of their chips in potentially there. Last question for me on this one. So we say potentially 3 first-round picks would be on the table for OKC. If we want Nikola, how many fewer picks are we willing to take in the Cam Johnson trade? You want him. You want him on the team. You believe that he can be a core piece when you go and get whatever players you get next year, but it has to be him. Is additional salary matching, one more first pick, and maybe a pick swap, is that enough? Is a handful of second rounders for the next 10 years, is that enough? Would you be willing to sacrifice some of those future picks to get that player?
Yeah, like Topic, and one more first or something like that. Would we come onto the episode the next day and feel pretty good about that? I think we would, right? I think we would. It's like it's a sort of a higher pick who we know would have gone even higher. It's one lower level first round pick. Would we come back and with whatever the money matching was, would we come back and say that feels like a good deal for a rebuilding Nets team, 19-year-olds who could have gone top 5 in the draft this year? I think we'd feel pretty good about that, right? Like because again, that would go back to what I just said about where picks land. Well, that one you know where it landed. See, the other hard thing with picks is you're trying to project out where they're going to land, which is why these young players actually don't get traded tons, is because once you know who they are, the teams don't want to give them up, right?
Yeah.
So
we know he's good. Great, we'll take him. Well,
we got the guy we wanted, and we're not going to give him. We got the guy we wanted. That's the guy we wanted. So we're not going to. That's why these guys don't get traded as often, and the picks are much easier to trade. He's like, because that could be anybody. They don't really know who it is. Like that could be anybody. Like, I don't know what you're going to do with it. Maybe you'll screw it up.
Topic. You could have him potentially.
You might screw it up. Who knows? I don't care. It's not a guy. That's why these guys are hard to give up. So I think we would come out. I'm just trying to judge what our reaction would be. My guess is our reaction would come back like him and a pick. We'd feel pretty good about it. If it was like him and just salary matching, I think it'd be closer. I'd still probably be. I don't know. Maybe I'd be all right with that, because I just know these other first round picks are just not going to be. They're going to be in the high 20s. They're just almost for sure going to be. If it's a pick that comes back that I don't think is going to be in the high 20s, then I would change my tune. But I just don't think that's going to be what's going to happen.
Yeah, yes, that too, right? Yeah, maybe it feels like it's closer to the lottery than it is to the back end of the first round. One of these other picks maybe feels different, but yeah, and it's rare, man. We talked about this a lot of opportunities, a lot of teams to trade with. There's not a lot where we say, oh, this player would be worth. The player is actually one of the biggest values coming back in this trade. Few and far between. I think that does matter, because when you look at this roster, it is pods. We think Noah Clowney is really coming on. That's going to be great. You're going to have all these draft picks. Jalen Wilson's good, a player to come off the bench for you. You love it. It's awesome. But there's going to be a lot to fill out here in terms of building a real contending team, not unlike the way the Oklahoma City Thunder have done it over the last handful of seasons. So fun to watch, and certainly interesting to see here, man. We're closing in on it. We're already midway through January. Come on. We got another couple weeks to go here. Sean Marks, do the right thing. Start having some of these trades come through.
And it also helps that he hasn't played too, because it kind of like it helps, and it helps both sides of wanting to do this, because you still like I just said with the story you can tell yourself about the draft pick, about like not knowing what it's going to be. That story's kind of related to this, because he hasn't taken the court yet. Okay, we're gonna get out of here.
And they know what Cam Johnson is too. When you're giving up picks, we know what Cam Johnson is, right? It's like we don't know.
You're getting a very good player. Cam Johnson is. You're getting a top 50 player in the NBA so far this year. Like that's just what you're getting. Like you're getting that, and that's worth a lot. All right, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets over on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
The robbed that smiles steals something from the thief. Now that is Billy Shakespeare.
Oh, R.I.P. One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow. Monday, talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah.